On the eve of December 23rd, the city of Seattle shimmered beneath a cold mist, holiday lights winking through frosted windows and a hush settling over every rain-slick street. I slipped into my tiny apartment after a 12-hour shift at the animal clinic, the familiar weight of exhaustion pressing down, but still carrying a secret hope that this Christmas, maybe things would feel different. My breath clouded in the air as I shrugged off my coat eyes, drifting to the suitcase by the door. Inside, I'd carefully wrapped small gifts, each one chosen with love, each one a quiet promise of belonging. I set my keys on the table, letting the silence settle. This year, I'd bought my mother's favorite cinnamon tea, picked out the softest wool socks for my dad, and even found the rare Italian honey that always made my sister Mallory smile. Every ribbon, every folded card felt like a small prayer for peace, a hope that I'd finally be seen for more than what I could do or fix. Outside, the streetlights cast pale halos onto the slick pavement, and I allowed myself to believe, if only for a moment, that family could be soft and safe. My phone buzzed on the counter, its glow cutting through the dusk. I smiled when I saw Mallory's name. "Hey, Mal," I greeted, warmth in my voice, but there was a tremor underneath. Her reply came gently, almost apologetic. "Eve, I wanted to let you know. James is joining us this Christmas. He's sensitive about, the clinic stuff. Mom and Dad think it's better if, maybe you sit this year out." The words hung in the air, fragile and heavy, all at once, unraveling the hope I'd so carefully patched together. I stood in the golden glow of string lights, their sparkle suddenly muted. Before I could even answer another call, came my father's voice, gentle but edged with finality. "Evelyn, honey, we just want things calm this year. You know how James is. If you show up, it might get tense. Maybe it's best if you stay home. No explanations, no gentle white lies, just the cold, clean break of exclusion." I pressed the phone to my chest and let the silence expand, realizing in that moment that sometimes the deepest wounds come not from what's said, but from what's left unsaid. The suitcase waited quietly by the door, a silent witness to years of trying, always showing up, always hoping my presence would finally be enough. My chest tightened, but there were no tears. Only a strange stillness, a dawning clarity that sometimes the more you bend to fit someone else's comfort, the more invisible you become. In that quiet with cinnamon and rain in the air, I understood this Christmas would be different. Not because I was included, but because for the first time I was choosing not to disappear, choosing to belong, if only to myself. The next morning, sunlight crept softly through my kitchen window, but it felt different, like even the light was quieter, uncertain whether it belonged. I stared at the untouched gifts, the suitcase now just another piece of furniture in my life. My parents' words from the night before echoed in the stillness. "If you come, we might not answer the door." It wasn't a threat, but a decision made behind closed doors. I thought about all the times I'd tried to earn my seat at the family table, believing if I gave enough I could finally belong. Yet here I was, left out by invitation. In America, holidays are painted as scenes of laughter, togetherness, and endless plates passed around a glowing table. But for many like me, the table is a symbol of something just out of reach. My friend Sarah once told me about the Thanksgiving she spent alone in her studio, microwaving leftovers while her family gathered states away. She described the ache of seeing smiling faces in group texts, the way even her favorite holiday songs sounded hollow. It's a silent story so many people share, but rarely speak about the quiet hurt of being told in so many ways that you're too much or not enough. I tried to tell myself it wasn't personal, that Mallory's boyfriend just needed peace, that my family was avoiding conflict, not me. But the truth was clear in their tone, the easy way they made space for someone new by asking me to shrink. It's a pattern I've seen in so many families. The helper is welcomed only when needed, but never truly wanted for who they are. If you're always the problem solver, it's easy to become the problem itself, the one who's too intense, too complicated. The reason things feel uneasy. My story is unique, but the feeling isn't. Looking back, I realized the mistake I kept making, confusing usefulness for belonging. It's common, especially for oldest daughters, to believe that if they work hard enough, if they're dependable enough, they'll finally be celebrated, not just tolerated. But real love isn't a reward for being less complicated or more convenient. It's not something you have to earn by dimming your light. I thought back to all the quiet Christmases when I bit my tongue or folded myself smaller just to keep the peace. None of those sacrifices ever bought me a place at the table. They only taught me how to disappear. So when my parents drew their line in the sand, I stopped begging for understanding. I made myself a promise this year I wouldn't chase a door half open or beg for a seat in a room that wasn't ready to welcome me. Instead, I'd start learning what it meant to belong to myself. There's a special kind of courage in choosing your own company, in deciding that your worth isn't measured by someone else's invitation. As the morning light warmed the floor, I felt the first flicker of relief, a gentle hope that maybe this Christmas being alone could feel like coming home. And as I packed away the gifts not out of anger but acceptance, I knew the next step was even harder, letting go of the role I'd played for so long. I would have to untangle the habits of saying yes, of rescuing, of showing up no matter how little space was made for me. What would it look like to live without that weight, to set boundaries and trust that real love won't ask me to keep shrinking? These were questions I'd never allowed myself to answer until now. Long before that December, I had already learned how to be invisible. As the oldest daughter, my role in our family was quietly assigned: be the steady one, the helper, the fixer. When Mallory forgot her homework or lost her shoes, I found solutions before anyone noticed. My parents would laugh and call her the creative spirit, while I was the responsible one, a title that sounded like praise but felt like armor. The unspoken rule was simple: Mallory could shine while I was there to sweep up the pieces. Over time, I mistook this for love, thinking my value was what I could offer, not who I was. I remember a Christmas when I was 16 staying up late to help Mom wrap gifts after Mallory had gone to bed. The house thick with the scent of cinnamon and pine. That night, Mallory spilled hot cocoa on the new white rug, giggling as she ran for towels. My parents shook their heads, smiling. "She's got such a spark," Dad said, ruffling her hair. But the next morning, when I accidentally chipped a plate, the mood shifted. "You need to be more careful, Evelyn." Mom sighed, her disappointment lingering in the air. That moment was small, but it stuck with me, a quiet lesson in who was allowed to make mistakes. Looking back, I see how many families fall into these patterns: the golden child who can do no wrong, and the helper whose worth is measured by usefulness. Mallory grew up to chase dreams, switch majors, open and close businesses, while I balanced work and night classes, careful never to ask for help. When she launched an online jewelry shop and needed rent, I sent money. When she missed a flight home for Thanksgiving, I paid the change fee without a word. To my family, this was normal. To me, it became a silent contract I never signed. I think about all the people I know who carry these invisible roles. The oldest son expected to hold the family together after a divorce, the middle child who cracks jokes to keep the peace, the single mom who never lets herself rest. We tell ourselves that being needed is the same as being loved, but that's a heavy misunderstanding, one that leaves us tired and unseen. True belonging means being valued not just for what you do, but for who you are, flaws and all. That lesson was slow to settle in my heart, but with each year I felt its truth growing louder. The first step to breaking free was noticing the difference between being helpful and being invisible. I started by naming what hurt moments, big and small, where I'd been overlooked. Instead of pushing them away, I let myself feel the ache. That honesty made space for something new, the idea that my needs mattered too. As I began to accept that, I found myself questioning what it would look like to rewrite my place in the family story, not as the fixer, but as someone worthy of care. That thought, fragile and unfamiliar, carried me into the next chapter of my journey. Over the years, my life quietly filled with small, silent sacrifices. I'd cover the cost when the roof leaked, schedule appointments, when Mom's arthritis flared, or quietly send rent, when Mallory's business dipped. It was a rhythm I knew by heart, solving every crisis before anyone else even noticed. No one asked. I just did it, believing that keeping the family afloat was my role. When friends spoke of being thanked or celebrated for their help, I would smile, but never quite relate. In my family, gratitude was unspoken, expected, as steady as the seasons. I told myself this was normal, that real love didn't keep score. One spring, my father's car broke down 2 days before a big work presentation. Without thinking, I arranged a tow, paid for repairs, and left his favorite chocolate on the passenger seat. There was no thank you, no acknowledgement, just an email a week later, asking if I could look over Mallory's taxes. I sometimes wondered if my quiet efforts truly mattered, or if they'd simply blended into the background unnoticed, like the hum of an old refrigerator. But every time I considered pulling back, guilt whispered that families are meant to show up even when it hurts. It's common, especially in American families, to assume the helper doesn't need help in return. I watched friends fall into similar traps, working overtime to support a sibling, sacrificing weekends to care for aging parents, always being the dependable one. They'd tell me stories with a laugh, but underneath was a loneliness I recognized. We teach ourselves that love is best measured by endurance, by what we can withstand. The cost, though, is quiet and cumulative. It's missed birthdays, ignored accomplishments, and the ache of never feeling seen outside your usefulness. The hardest lesson was realizing that giving without boundaries isn't the same as loving. When love becomes labor, it stops feeling like love at all. It becomes obligation, a weight you carry alone. Looking back, I see how I feared that if I stopped helping, the whole family would fall apart, and somehow it would be my fault. But the truth is, every relationship needs room for give and take. When all the giving comes from one side, resentment grows, even if we try to swallow it. Learning this truth hurt, but it set the stage for what needed to come next. So that December, as I looked at my dwindling savings and the ever-growing list of things I'd fixed, I started asking myself what would happen if I stopped. If the roof leaked, would someone else find a way? If a bill went unpaid, would it truly be a disaster? The answers weren't as frightening as I'd imagined. There was freedom in the possibility that I could let go, even if just for a season. That fragile hope was enough to nudge me toward change, to wonder what life could feel like if I learned to give myself the same care I'd always given everyone else. That December, the decision to finally step back began with small, simple actions. I opened my laptop one evening, logged into the banking apps that had become second nature, and hovered over the scheduled payments. For years, I'd covered my parents' mortgage shortfall, auto-transferred money to Mallory, and picked up surprise expenses no one ever discussed. My hands shook as I clicked cancel on each one. It felt almost mechanical at first, as routine as brushing my teeth. But beneath that surface, something unfamiliar stirred a quiet sense of possibility. What if just this once, I let things unfold without me racing to the rescue? The first day after I stopped, I half expected my phone to ring with urgent calls or worried texts. But the house stayed silent, as if the world hadn't noticed the shift at all. That surprised me, and in a strange way it was freeing. No one was begging for my help, no one was angry. The only noise was the gentle hum of the city outside my window. I realized I'd built up the fear of catastrophe in my mind, convinced that my absence would spark chaos. Instead, there was just space and silence and a sense of relief I'd never anticipated. I thought of my friend Jess, who once told me how hard it was to stop solving everyone's problems. She'd always been the go-to for her siblings, the fixer for her parents' messy finances. When she finally drew boundaries, she braced herself for backlash. But what came was mostly confusion, not disaster. It's strange how much of the drama lives in our own heads, she confided over coffee. That conversation stayed with me. It reminded me that sometimes the hardest part of saying no isn't others' disappointment, but letting go of our own need to be needed. That was the lesson I was learning slowly with each passing day. As the days rolled by, I felt the old guilt trying to creep back in. Every time I saw a bill or remembered a problem I used to handle, I had to remind myself it's okay to let others figure things out for themselves. Families like people learn and adapt. By stepping back, I was giving everyone a chance to grow, including myself. I was beginning to understand that healthy love doesn't require constant sacrifice. It allows space for both help and independence, for giving and receiving, for presence and for boundaries. That new awareness felt tender, but also empowering. With Christmas approaching, I found myself wondering what a holiday on my own terms would look like. Could there be comfort in solitude? Was it possible to build new traditions that centered on peace rather than performance? The old fears hadn't disappeared entirely, but the freedom I felt from letting go was enough to keep me moving forward. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I knew that for the first time my choices were truly my own. That hope, however fragile, felt like the first real gift I'd given myself in years. Christmas Eve arrived quietly that year. For the first time, my apartment felt both bigger and emptier. No plans to pack up food, no last-minute calls to double-check gifts or recipes. The city below was hushed lights, flickering through mist on the street, while I brewed a pot of peppermint tea and let the quiet settle in. At first, I expected to feel lonely or lost, but instead a gentle calm washed over me. I realized how much energy I'd spent trying to anticipate everyone else's needs, forgetting my own. Now in the silence, there was finally room to breathe, to listen to the rhythm of my own heart. It surprised me how comforting small rituals could become. I hung my favorite ornaments on a tiny tree, baked cinnamon rolls, just for myself, and watched old movies I loved. The space I'd always longed for was suddenly mine, free from obligation or expectation. I remembered a patient, Mrs. Klein, who'd once told me that the first year she spent the holidays alone after her husband passed, she was terrified, but it turned out to be one of the most peaceful times of her life. It's not about the number of people, she'd said, it's about how gently you treat your own soul. This Christmas, I gave myself permission to rest. I let go of the pressure to make everything perfect, or to perform happiness for anyone else. It was strange at first, but gradually I learned to savor it. I made a list of small things that brought me joy. Lighting a favorite candle, reading by the window, playing the piano quietly into the night. With each act, I reclaimed a little piece of myself. I started to see solitude not as something to fear, but as an opportunity for healing, for reflection, and for building new traditions from the ground up. One lesson grew clear as the hours passed. Real comfort isn't found in the noise or bustle of a full house, but in the peace that comes from honoring your own needs. I began to imagine what life could look like if I kept choosing myself, not just during the holidays, but all year long. That thought felt both radical and hopeful, like planting a seed that might one day grow into something strong. I wasn't running away from family or tradition. I was moving toward a gentler, more authentic way of living, one where belonging started from within. As the night deepened and snow began to fall softly outside my window, I realized this Christmas wasn't about absence, but about presence, my own. I didn't know what my family would do without me, or how they might react in the days to come, but for the first time that question didn't hold any power over me. I felt anchored in the quiet, grounded by the choice to make room for myself. Whatever happened next, I was ready to meet it on my own terms, with open hands and an open heart. In the days after Christmas, something unexpected began to ripple through my family. At first, my absence was barely mentioned, a gap in the group photo, a quiet seat at the table. But as little problems emerged, my name slipped into conversations. Mallory called our mom in tears after her car wouldn't start, and no one knew what to do. My dad tried to fix a leaky faucet and ended up flooding the bathroom. They scrambled for solutions, each call or text met with gentle silence. I wasn't angry, just quietly detached, letting the world turn without my usual safety net beneath them. It didn't take long for people outside our family to notice too. My Aunt Denise, visiting from California, asked, "Where's Evelyn? She always carves the roast." There was an awkward shuffle before someone muttered that I was busy with work. Later, I heard through a friend that a neighbor, Mrs. Rose Friedman, stopped by with cookies and seemed surprised I wasn't there to open the door. She posted a kind note on social media, remembering the year I'd driven her to midnight mass when her own children couldn't make it home. For the first time, the quiet echo of my presence was felt by more than just my immediate family. It reminded me of something I'd once read sometimes. Your absence speaks louder than your presence ever could. When you're always available, your contributions become invisible, taken for granted until they're gone. I saw this play out not just in my own life, but in friends' stories too. The nurse who was never thanked until she took a vacation. The coach whose absence left a team fumbling. We underestimate how much we hold together until we finally let go. The lesson was bittersweet, but it brought me a sense of dignity I'd never known before. Instead of feeling guilty for the disruptions, I felt strangely at peace. My family's small struggles were proof that my role had mattered, even if they never said it out loud. I didn't need to rush in and rescue anyone to prove my worth. Instead, I focused on the quiet ways my life was unfolding, catching up with friends over coffee, volunteering at the animal shelter, rediscovering old hobbies. With each new experience, I reclaimed another piece of myself, learning that life didn't have to revolve around constant giving to be meaningful or full. As the new year crept in, I realized that change doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from quietly stepping away and letting others discover their own strength. My family would have to adapt just as I had. For the first time, I felt truly free. Not because my absence caused chaos, but because it gave me space to find my own voice. I knew that new challenges would come, and perhaps so would misunderstandings. But I was ready to face them, anchored in the lesson that sometimes distance is the very thing that brings everything into focus. A few weeks after the holidays, my phone buzzed unexpectedly, an email from Aunt Denise, the one who still mailed handwritten cards. Her message was simple, but carried weight. "You've done enough damage already." Those words hit me like a cold wave, confusing and sharp. I hadn't spoken much since Christmas, and yet here was someone framing my absence as a kind of harm. It reminded me how family stories often twist truth to fit comfort, painting those who step away as troublemakers. It's a familiar pattern where silence or boundaries are met, not with understanding, but with blame. This experience echoed a friend's story. Sarah once shared how her decision to stop bailing out her brother financially was met with accusations of cruelty, even though she had supported him for years. She realized that sometimes families resist change because it unsettles the narrative they've built, a narrative that depends on certain roles remaining fixed. When someone breaks free, it threatens the illusion of harmony. It was a hard lesson for both of us. Growth can make those around us uncomfortable, and that discomfort often gets misdirected as anger or hurt. Still, I refused to let those words define me. I reminded myself that setting boundaries isn't about causing damage, it's about protecting your own well-being. Love doesn't demand endless sacrifice. True love sees and respects limits. This was a new kind of strength. I was learning to hold the courage to stand firm, even when others push back. It's a path many walk quietly without applause. The more I embraced this, the more I realized that sometimes the biggest acts of love start with saying no. Around that time, I received a message that shifted everything. Marina, a family friend, reached out not with judgment, but with gratitude. She told me about her grandmother, a patient I'd cared for during my busiest weeks, someone whose life I'd touched when others had given up hope. Marina's words reminded me that the impact we make often stretches far beyond the places we expect. We might not be seen by everyone, but we are never truly invisible. That message was a quiet balm, healing parts of me I hadn't even known were broken. With those words in my heart, I found the courage to face the next chapter. I knew my family might never fully understand or accept my boundaries. That was their journey, not mine. But I could choose how I showed up in the world from a place of self-respect and peace. Sometimes love means stepping back, trusting in your own worth, and letting others carry their own weight. I felt ready to embrace that truth, to write my own story, and to invite others to do the same. Not long after Marina's message, another email arrived, this time less polished, more urgent. It was from my parents, signed by Mallory too, titled simply, "We miss you. We never meant to hurt you. Can we start over?" At first glance, it felt hopeful, but as I read further, the true reason became clear. Please ask Marina to take down her post. Apparently, it was affecting Mallory's art career. The apology felt transactional, a negotiation, rather than genuine remorse. It was a stark reminder that for them, peace meant preserving appearances, not healing wounds. I knew then that some bridges weren't meant to be rebuilt, not without real change. This kind of conditional apology isn't uncommon. A close friend once shared how her family apologized only when forced by public embarrassment, not because they had acknowledged their mistakes. It taught me that healing can't be rushed or demanded by others. True forgiveness starts with sincere understanding, and sometimes that takes time, years, even decades. It also made me realize that expecting others to change on our timeline often leads to disappointment. Instead, we must focus on our own growth and peace, regardless of others' readiness to meet us halfway. I chose not to respond to that email. It wasn't bitterness, but self-preservation. I had learned the hard way that silence can be a powerful boundary. Sometimes not engaging is the clearest way to protect your heart. I spent that evening reflecting on all I'd endured, all I'd given, and all I still hoped for, not from them, but for myself. It was a quiet, sacred moment of acceptance. I wasn't waiting for an invitation to be loved or included anymore. I was creating space to love myself fully on my own terms. With the weight lifting, I found new energy to live authentically. I returned to my work at the clinic with renewed passion, sitting beside animals whose families had come and gone, bearing witness to their lives with kindness and presence. Their stories reminded me daily that worth isn't measured by others' approval. Like those patients, I was deserving of care, respect, and recognition simply because I existed. It was a lesson I carried with me beyond clinic walls, into every relationship, every decision, every moment of quiet self-reflection. If you've ever felt overlooked or pressured to prove your worth repeatedly, know this. Your value isn't defined by others' willingness to see you. You are allowed to take up space, to say no, to set boundaries. Sometimes the most courageous act is choosing peace over performance. As I continue on this journey, I invite you to consider your own story. What parts of yourself have you hidden to be accepted? What would it look like to finally show up fully and unapologetically as you are? Together, maybe we can begin to rewrite those stories. Looking back on this journey, I see how I carried so much weight for others, believing my value depended on what I could fix or give. I learned that being seen and loved isn't about sacrifice or silence, but about honoring who you truly are. Family doesn't always recognize our worth, and sometimes the hardest act of love is choosing yourself over their expectations. I found peace not in their acceptance, but in my own boundaries and self-respect. That discovery transformed my life and gave me a freedom I never imagined possible. If anything in my story resonates with you, know that you are not alone. Many of us have felt overlooked, invisible, or forced to shrink ourselves for others. It's okay to say no, to take up space, and to demand kindness, especially from yourself. True belonging begins with self-acceptance. We don't have to earn love by being perfect or useful. We are worthy simply because we exist. That's a truth worth embracing and sharing. I invite you to join this conversation. If you've ever felt pressured to prove your worth, or if you're learning to set healthy boundaries, please share your story in the comments below. Your words might be the light someone else needs to hear today. If this message touched you, please like and subscribe so we can build a community of support and understanding. Together, we can choose peace over performance. Thank you for listening to my journey, for holding space with me through the quiet battles and the breakthroughs. Remember, you deserve to be seen, heard, and loved just as you are. No more shrinking, no more hiding. This is your reminder that you are enough and your story matters. I'm grateful to walk this path alongside you.